Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be giving you a quick overview on how to set up some props in xLights, and then we're going to push the config from xLights out to our Falcon F16 controller, and we're also going to push the config to FPP so that we can play the show from our Raspberry Pi without needing to tie up the computer. So let's crack on and go through the hardware that we've got. Now down here we've got our Raspberry Pi single board computer. This is a model 3B+. Model 4 will do just as fine. That is connected via Ethernet to my shed network, and it's running FPP version 7.5. Now the controller we're using today is a Falcon F16v3. It's one of the older Falcons these days, and the config that we're doing will work just fine on the V3 board here. It will work on a V4 or a V5. If you're using the V3 board, you need to make sure that you're on version 259 or greater of the firmware, and then that way it will support DDP, which is the protocol that we're going to be using to drive our pixels today. And finally, I've got a couple of short strings of pixels, just 10 pixels in each string, and we're going to hook those up to the F16 and get those running for you. So let's crack on with it. I've got a copy of xLights open on my laptop here, and I'm going to start in the Layout tab. Now I'm just going to bring in a couple of single lines. So create a new single line, and we'll just drag in one of those. There we go. And I'm going to set that, I'm going to rename it first of all to Demo 1. And I'm going to give it a count of 10 pixels. There we go. And string properties, let's just give them a pixel size of 5 so you can see them a little bit better. There we go. So that's our first string. And then I'm going to bring in a second string, just the same. There we go. And I'm going to call that string Demo 2. Once again, I'm going to set it to 10 pixels. And let's see if we can change the pixel. It doesn't make a lot of difference on here, but there we go. That one worked, look. That one didn't take. There we go. So there you go. You can see both the sets of pixels. Now I only increased the size just to make it a little more visible for you. There's no need to actually do that. So there's our two strings of 10 pixels in xLights. So they're in our layout. What we need to do now is to apply those strings to a controller. Now, in the real world here, I'm going to connect one string here to port number 15 on my F16, and I'm going to connect the other string here to port number 9. There we go, that's those connected. Now, we're going to configure the F16 first of all in xLights. So let's go to the Controllers tab, and I'm going to hit Discover. Now, whilst it's gone away to do that, it's worth noting that in an ideal world, you really want your F16 and your FPP instance, if you're running them, to remain on the same IP address throughout the season. It's just going to make your life so much easier if it stays where it's put, it doesn't move, and you don't have to start messing about with settings to get things moving. Now, the quickest way of doing that is to set what's called a static IP on your controller, you need to give it an address, an IP address that's within the network range on your existing home network, and the same for FPP. Now, the alternative to that is a thing called a DHCP reservation. And if you have a slightly more advanced home router, you might have got lucky with the one provided by your ISP, or maybe you've bought one yourself. And that will offer a thing called a DHCP reservation. And you can set that on your router to always give the same address when these devices are connected to the network. The latter there is what I prefer to do. I'll always try and use a DHCP reservation, because it means if something goes completely pear-shaped and I have to reset the controller or I have to reinstall FPP, as soon as they come back up and they get an IP address from the network, I know it's going to be the same as the one it had previously, so I can jump straight back in and sort out my configuration issues. Going any deeper on that's a bit outside of the scope of this video, but I just wanted to touch on it before we move further. Now, in the background here, xLights has gone away, interrogated the network, and it's found both our FPP instance and our controller. So that's done half the job for us. So I'm just going to hit save, and then we'll go in and configure each one. So starting with the F16, we can see that it's discovered. It's got a name of F16-259. The description is F16v3, and the vendor, as expected, is F16. Is Falcon, and the model is F16v3. Now, obviously, if you're using a V4 or V5, those would change appropriately. Now, xLights has decided that it's got 2 expansion boards. Well, it hasn't. It doesn't have any expansion boards, so we need to adjust that. There we go. No expansion boards. Thank you. We can leave auto layout, auto size, xLights control, etc. It's active. The only thing I want to change on here in 2024 is the protocol. E131 is a bit legacy now, so we want to update to use DDP, which is more efficient and easier to configure. So I've set that to DDP, and that is our settings for the controller side done. Look at that. So that's done. So we can now save for the F16. That is now ready. Now I'm just going to whiz into FPP. That has set itself up just as FPP. Now we can set the vendor to be FPP, the model to be an FPP player only. Now, because this FPP instance is only going to be a player, we haven't got any pixels connected directly to it. I'm going to change the active to xLights only. Now that way, when we push the configuration in a few moments to FPP, it won't try and set itself up as an output device to send pixel data to itself. So it should just behave quite nicely now. So there we go. That's our 2 controllers set up, our F16 and our FPP. What we need to do now is to assign our 2 strings of pixels that we'd set up on the layout tab and assign them to ports on the F16. So I can click on the F16, and then down at the bottom I can go to visualize. And we see here that the pixel ports are all available to us on the left, and our 2 models are available on the right. So all we've got to do is to drag them to the correct ports. Now demo string 1 I put onto port 9, and demo string 2 I put onto port 15. There we go. So let's assign those to their ports. So I can now come out of there and save. There we go. And that has now configured channels 1 to 60 on the F16. Now, 60 channels makes sense because we've got two lots of 10 pixels, so we've got 20 pixels. Each pixel has 3 channels for red, green and blue. So 3 times 20 gives us our 60. So that all matches up. Now we are at this point ready to push the configuration from xLights directly onto the controller. Before we do, let's just have a quick look and make sure that the controller is ready. So I'm just going to go navigate to it. So here's the web page for the controller. At the moment you can see it's in E131 and it's not configured for anything. The inputs, the E131, it's just got the generic settings. It's not been configured yet. And the same for the string ports, just has the generic 50 pixels per port. So what we'll do now is we'll go back into xLights and we can push the config using upload output. First thing it's going to do is to reboot the controller, and I can see on the OLED that the controller is indeed rebooting. It's just starting up. It doesn't have, the clock isn't running on the uptime yet. There it goes, it's just started and it's got itself an IP address. And very quickly on the back of that, xLights has finished, and down at the bottom left it says Falcon upload complete. If we now go back into the Falcon web page and I just refresh it, we can see the controller mode now has changed to DDP. And if I look at my string ports, I can see that demo 1 and demo 2 have been configured in the controller on their relevant ports. So that's awesome. That's ready to go. Let's just test these pixels whilst we're in here. So I'm going to go for test and go for color wash. And there we go. We can see our pixels are doing a color wash. So we know that they're wired correctly to the board. All good. So the controller is done. That's all ready to go. Let's now look at getting the configuration across to FPP. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for Tools and FPP Connect. There we go. It's found our FPP instance, which is given us a version of 7.5-4. It's got the IP address there. The FSEQ type is V2 sparse, and under normal conditions, that's what you'd leave it as. We're going to upload media. We don't have any yet, but it could do. Models, I'm going to push models, so I want all of those. And we'll demonstrate what the models are. It's just going to be the details for strings demo 1 and demo 2. But we'll see that shortly. UDP out needs to be all, and this is where xLights will configure the output to send data from FPP to the Falcon. We don't have a playlist and we don't have a cape, so we can upload. There we go. xLights has now pushed the configuration for FPP directly onto it, so we can now go and look at FPP. So let's open up a new tab in here. Now the FPP was a fresh install, so I need to just set the a UI password, the OS password, and the banner. There we go, that's those three. And once we've done those, we can finish and restart FPPD. There we go, right, FPPD is now ready. Let's go and check the outputs. So under input output setup, channel outputs, there we go. We can see that it's been configured. The output is enabled and it has one output string set to send to the F16 on its IP address with the relevant channels. So FPP is now set up as a player. It's ready to go. So the Falcon's ready to receive. xLights is set up, ready to go. FPP is set up, ready to go. Let's sort out a sequence. So let's go into xLights. I'm going to go to File, New Sequence. I'm just going to go for an animation today, 40 frames per second, and a quick start. There we go. It's switched to the Sequencer tab, and we have the two entries in here for our two props. In this case, our two strings. So I'm going to bring a bars effect across to demo 1. Now I need to just tweak the settings on that so that it rotates a bit more often. Let's set it to go through 10 cycles, maybe, and repeat the palette 5 times. There we go. That should make it do. There we go. That's flashing away now in the demo there. And if I bring a butterfly down onto the other string, again we'll drag it out to 30 seconds. We should be able to see now that that indeed will also be doing stuff. So that's a very quick sequence, and definitely not up to the standards of some of the professionals, shall I say. So I'm going to save this, and I'll just call it demo. I'm then going to render it. There we go, that's done, and I'm going to save again. And now we should be ready to test xLights pushing directly to the controller. So if I click Output to Lights and I click Play, there we go. I can see that this is working beautifully. We've got our colours test going on here, and we've got, well, a very convoluted colour scheme going here, which is the butterfly doing its thing. So they're both working just fine. Beautiful. So we've tested the sequence, we're happy with it. We're ready to push that now to FPP. So I can go to Tools and FPP Connect once again. And we've got the settings here as we had exactly before, but down at the bottom now we have a sequence available that we can push. So I'm going to check the sequence and I'm going to upload. There we go. So xLights has not only pushed the config to the FPP instance once again, but it's also now uploaded the sequence. So that should be ready for us. So if I go to Status Control Status on FPP, we can see in the middle now that we have a demo sequence ready. Now if I hit play on that, we can see that it's messing about. The sequence is not playing nicely, it's jittery, it's doing horrible things. And the reason for that is that I've still got output to lights switched on in xLights. So both xLights and FPP are busy trying to send data, and it's causing it problems. So let's stop that for a second. There we go. And I'm going to go back into xLights, turn off output to lights, and then go back and press play again. And there we are. They're now doing their thing quite happily, as they should be. So that's a very quick run through on how to set up xLights with a couple of strings of pixels on a Falcon F16 and on FPP 7.5. We started with a fresh install of xLights. We added a couple of strings of pixels. We then added the controllers using the discover mechanism. We tailored the discovery settings for the controllers slightly to make sure that they were as we wanted and not as it wanted. Using visualize, we then copied the two strings onto the F16 and we pushed the configuration out to the F16 using upload outputs. Once we were happy with that, we then used Tools and FPP Connect to push the same config out to FPP. Once that was done, we created a very short sequence. We tested it in xLights, proved that it worked. We saved it, demoed it, and then we used Tools FPP Connect to push the sequence up to FPP, where we were able to demo it once again from FPP once we turned off output to lights in xLights. So a very quick one. It really isn't as complicated as it seems at first glance. As you've just seen, it's quite a straightforward task if you know what you're doing. Now, hopefully I've gone along at a pace that you can step through it and you can get your own controllers set up nice and quickly and not go through the pain that some people have in the past of when they're not really able to visualize what's going on. So please do like and subscribe if you found it useful. Make a comment below of how I could improve things or what other videos you'd like to see. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Have fun. Let's make it the best lighting season yet. Take care. See you soon.